Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, thanks for giving us a little chance here to get to know you some. First of all, let's just start with your name, Condoleezza.
Yes.
Specifically, your mother gave it to you.
She did.
Why?
It is from Condoleezza, and my mother wanted a musical term. It means with sweetness. And my mother was a musician, and that's the name that she chose.
And your dad was convinced you were going to be a boy. Did it help at all that you're such a big sports freak?
I was definitely going to be my father's All-American linebacker. I was going to be named John had I been a boy after him. And I think he just decided he was going to turn me into a wild sports fan instead, and it worked.
And he did.
He did. He did.
So everybody got what they wanted,
Everybody got it. It was
basically.
music with my mother and sports with my father.
You grew up in Alabama. You had some experience with segregation during your childhood. In particular, you wrote in your family memoir about an experience when you were 7 with a sales clerk. Tell me about that.
Yes, it was, of course, the most segregated big city in America, Birmingham. And my mother and I went to buy an Easter dress, and we went into one of the big department stores, and the lady said, the sales lady, she'll have to try it on in there, and pointed to a storeroom. And my mother said, looking her dead in the eye, either she tries this dress on in the fitting room or we don't buy it. And this poor lady, who was just doing her job, stood watch while we tried it on in the fitting room. I'm sure she thought she was going to lose her job if she'd been seen.
Different country now.
Different country now. Different country. Thank goodness, yes.
Both of your parents passed before you became Secretary of State. Is that the moment in your life when you wish they had been there?
Yes.
Or were there others?
When I was Secretary of State, there were so many times stepping off a plane that said United States of America, walking into the Kremlin or going into the Kremlin through the Spassky Gate in the presidential limousine, meeting the Queen of England and playing with Yo-Yo Ma. Those were times that I really wish I could have said to my parents, so what did you think? But I've always, as I said, felt their presence more than their absence.
Which is actually one of the nice things, is once you stop grieving, you kind of get them back.
You do, in a very special way, because then the memories and the love and the support are still there in some way that's very hard to explain.
Yeah, you write in your own sort of getting to know moment with George W. Bush that in 1998 he told you he wanted to run for president. And how did you assess his chances at the time?
Well, I remember thinking that it had long odds for success because we had gone through a period of relative peace and prosperity, and Al Gore was a veteran, and I thought, boy, this really, it's not going to happen. But, you know, I didn't say it. I was at the family compound. I wasn't going to say it.
You were a friend of his dad's, a friend of the family.
I was a friend of the family. I'd worked for President George H.W. Bush as his Soviet specialist at the end of the Cold War, and we'd stayed very much in touch.
Tell me about, you talk about your dad's love of politics. He's a news junkie. He was a news junkie. And you write in one of your memoirs about an impossible poll test that he was given. Yes. Tell me a little bit about that story, because it also sort of shaped his party affiliation.
It did shape his party affiliation, because my dad went down to vote with my mother. They were not yet married, but they went down to vote. My mother was fair-skinned, very pretty, and there was something called a poll test in those days. And the poll tester said, so who's the President of the United States, the first President of the United States? And my mother said, George Washington. He said, fine, you can vote. And then he turned to my father, big man, rather dark-skinned, and he said, how many beans are in this jar? And it was obviously impossible to count. So my father went back to talk to an old man in his church, and Mr. Frank Hunter said, oh, Reverend, he said, don't worry, I'll show you how to get registered. He said, there's a clerk down there, she's a Republican, and she's trying to build the party, and she will register anybody who'll say they're a Republican. This was in the days of very few Republicans at the South. And so he went down, she registered him, he never forgot it, he became a member of the Grand Old Party and stayed one until, and here I am, here I am.
The legacy of one woman at a polling place in Alabama.
Polling place in Alabama, right.
Something came up today, they asked me this question I didn't know. There is, and we don't know if this is a legend or, you know, mythology of Washington, that at some point with George Bush, the son, you were talking in a group and referred to him as your husband.
I've
in
heard
some...
this before. It's
Is that-
just, of
okay.
course, I can't even imagine that I would have said
Well,
such a thing.
you know, there's work husbands.
Yes,
you know, there's that
right,
kind of-
right. No,
yeah,
no, I think
no.
somebody
Okay,
heard-
that was mythology.
Right, that's
I said,
mythology,
I thought, well, I'll
yes.
ask her.
Right.
And finally, you had a birthday last Monday?
I
Happy belated
did.
birthday.
Thank you very much.
Did you do anything special for yourself?
Well, on the Sunday before, the 13th, I was born on November 14th, a group of friends gave a wonderful birthday party for me in which they had a cake that was in the shape of a golf bag, which is my new passion. And so I had a great time, and then I went back out on book tour on Monday. So on my actual birthday, I was on book tour.
For sure. So now we know the real reason why you don't want to come back to Washington is that you've taken up golf.
I've taken up golf.
And
It's a lot
Washington is
easier.
too busy.
A lot easier to play it in California.
And you can play for many, many months longer.
You can indeed. That's
Thank
right.
you so much for letting us get to know you a little
Thank
bit.
you.
Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, we appreciate it.